Commission to order. Here to talk about the school capacities and concerns. Are we going to do I'll do the presentation first? Is that there she is. It's too close. Rhonda, do you want to come on up here and
Can get you some glasses.
or you want to just sit at the table with us, Rhonda? Yeah, come sit at the table.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Afternoon.
Two things. So we have the PowerPoint presentation, and then all the charts inside. I've also given you full-size copies, so they'll be easier to read as we go through the Yes, ma'am.
Use your cheerleader voice.
My cheerleader voice? Okay. Is that better? Okay. Let me get situated here. Alrighty. Got it.
As she gets started, what we were going to do is just have her kind of walk through the way we compile the numbers and what we do with them, just to kind of give us a little background on where the reports come from and kind of the use of the report. That sort of stuff.
Just so you're aware, I'm not going to read line by line. A lot of these are just informational slides, so when you leave, you'll have a reference point to go back to on what I said each of the columns were and how they've been calculated. So the first thing we do in planning services is for the county and the two cities, we receive all development applications, whether they're commercial or residential. If they're commercial, we just sign off as no impact and we send them back to the appropriate entity. If they're any type of residential dwelling unit, we start putting them in what we call a residential tracker. We add the development, the developer name, the number of units, and from that point forward, we begin to track through permits and CO reports that we receive from the county and the two cities, every permit that's issued, every CO that's issued, so that we kind of have a constant running, full accurate report of all development going on in the county. We also take into consideration inside of the tracker the new categories that we have.
Ron, I didn't mean to. Is somebody gonna click through the PowerPoint?
Yep, see, I'm just chatting along.
That's all right.
So we
Commissioner
also,
Grieve was asking.
sorry about that.
You did such a nice job, so everybody can see it.
Thank you. So we also take into consideration some of the new categories that went into effect inside of our most recent impact fee study, which is the vacation villas and the short-term rentals. So if you're exempted, we literally zero out any type of student impact inside of our residential tracker. And if you carry a classification of short-term rental, we've reduced the impact based on the student generation fee that was assigned inside of our impact fee. And those numbers are constantly calculating in the back of the form. As I briefly mentioned, we also keep a list of all permits and certificates of occupancy. So last year for 2018-19, and that means July 1st, 2018 to June 30, 2019, we show that 4,599 residential permits were issued, and as of June 30 of 2019, 3,653 of those received a certificate of occupancy. On all of this data will link back to the residential tracker.
You want us to ask questions
Sure.
during? Or?
Yeah, ask them as we go.
Okay, so the slide before, you got exemptions, affordable workforce housing.
Yes, ma'am.
I know that you have the ability if there's additional fees, but is there some right now that are exempt?
Yeah. We have housing for older person applications that have been approved to date.
Right, but if you have specifically affordable workforce housing.
The only application we received to date was denied. A question I had been asked earlier, it wasn't denied in the sense that they didn't meet the criteria. It became denied at a level that per the impact fee, the school board can deny due to lack of revenue to offset the impact, and that was the option that was sought when we denied the application.
Thank you.
Okay. So next we have staff on the front row here. They literally go out each year and they visit all of the active residential developments. So for the purpose of today, we are only talking developments that have received their FS, which is final subdivision, or their SDP, which is a site development plan, So we're not talking about zoning amendments today, conceptual plans are preliminary. We're only talking about, we actually track the communities and developments that are actively either turning dirt or getting ready to turn dirt and build their homes. So we do our annual visits between July and September. As of October 2018, when we did our last snapshot, and we're in the process of collecting all the new data, at that time we were tracking just over 200 developments inside of Osceola County. We use software through DDP called School Site Software, and we monitor all this through GIS tracking. So inside of that, we also keep a development name, the unit type, and the phasing. So for instance, if a development's coming through and their long-term build-out is 7,500 units, we only enter into the tracker the actual developments coming through. So if they put through for 1,500, we'll begin to track 1,500 units. If phase 2 is 500, we'll add another 500. Currently what we're seeing for tracking is about 100 to 125 residential units per development that they're building in a 12-month period, excluding apartments. Apartments just depends on how big the unit is, the development is, but for residential development, they're averaging 100 to 125 units a year. We then take all of that information from a school board standard, and we tie all of that development into the attendance zones. And we track it to a specific school based on the location of the development inside of our attendance zone boundaries. So this chart, to date, if we take all FSs and SDPs approved by Osceola County, City of Kissimmee, and the City of St. Cloud as of today, and not concerned about how long it's going to take them to build out, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, or 20. But right now approved on the record is 27,907 residential units. And what that could mean for the school district is 10,119 new K-12 students. So while we know we're not going to build 27,000 units in the next 3 years, we do have the potential, due to the number of developments that are on record, we could reach that in a 5 to 7 year period. So this is what's approved to date. So if for some reason we all decided we were never going to issue another permit and we were only going to allow what's on the books to finish building out, we would still see another 27,900 homes come into Osceola County.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, sir.
Your equations you're able to get from 27,000 units down to 10,000 students. How is that formulated?
How do we do that?
Yes.
So we have an educational impact fee study, which is done through Tyndall Oliver, and inside of that report, they come up with a student generation rate for an average, and it's based on if it's a single family, a multifamily, a townhome, a mobile home, apartment, a condo, etc. So when the developer application comes in, we take the number of the dwelling type times that specified generation rate, and whether it's elementary, middle, or high school, and this number is calculated for us.
How did they come up with that specified generation rate? Is that based on a current number of units in Osceola County divided by the number of students that are currently here, or age,
Yes.
demographic? Or
So about 2 years ago, we went through the property appraiser's office, and we get the database from there, and then we release the addresses of the students into the consultant, and they match all the student addresses to all the available units inside of Osceola County. So we know if the students are living in more mobile homes, apartments, and then they generate the generation rate based off of how many students are living in which type of unit.
how often do y'all look at that? Is that
Every
something-
3 years.
Okay.
At a minimum.
Okay, perfect.
Yes.
And Brandon, that's also, when we did the last study, is when we looked at different groupings. And that's when these apartments, multifamily, really took a big jump. Big jump. It is partly because prior to 5 years ago, maybe, a lot of our apartments were smaller complexes and that sort of stuff. Then you built huge mega complexes right over here on Park Settlement, Shady Lane, and that, which are more of the families, younger, and which drove that number up considerably. It took a huge jump from 6 years ago, 5, whatever it
I think
was.
it was 3 times,
Yeah, it went up, yeah.
2.5 maybe.
So,
And just to extend on that, though, how are the homeless children, when they're categorized homeless, is that a whole different category that's calculated in here?
So the thing to keep in mind with our children that are family in transition, if you have a family living as a family, within a family, they will also consider that a family in transition. So if they're living in a residential unit, a single-family home, it'll apply toward that. The ones we do not capture inside of the impact fee would be the students that are living in a hotel or a commercial type of dwelling unit.
If they're precariously housed, because I think, do they categorize them if they're jumping from couch to couch or something to that effect? Do they still categorize them as homeless
It's
under the
based on the
document?
time we snapshotted the information and we send it to the consultant, what type of unit their address is attached to when we take the snapshot. Then they're going to get applied into that type of dwelling unit, which will create the generation rate.
Right, but right now, as it stands, so the hotel children are not technically counted.
Not inside of the generation rate, no.
Thank
The other clarification I'd like to make, the big jump from the last impact fee study to this one, we used to double up some of the categories, so single family and townhome worked together, we separated them, and multifamily and condominium also used to be grouped together, and we separated them out, and that also kind of impacted the apartment units going up because we took the condo units away from the calculation.
Ron, did you know off the top of your head, I know you know the categories, but can you give them the categories, and do you know the generation rates?
There,
Is it in?
when we get back here
Generation.
further, we look at a school capacity
That's
report,
fine.
you'll be able to see the generation rate by grade, by type of dwelling unit. Okay?
Besides the new development, do you have a calculation for families buying existing homes to play into these equations when it factors into capacity?
For B, from a projection standpoint,
I mean,
I
it's
do
a-
not have the ability to monitor them, but they would be captured during the generation rate because the address, the student's address would be attached
Okay.
to whatever type of dwelling unit it is, and it would be calculated in that generation rate.
Just wondering, like, how many went from, elderly parents that either passed on or moved, and then a family bought the house and had two kids and
That
impacting her.
that would impact the single-family home rate when the
Right.
calculation is done.
Okay.
Maybe? So before we get, so where we're going to go next is, we're going to talk about the way you currently see our data when it is presented to you, either at a DRC, a Planning Commission, or Board of County Commissioner meeting. And then we're going to propose a new way to present that data to you, which we believe will better represent where we're all trying to go. So briefly, before we move forward, we want to give you some definitions that you'll hear us use over and over, and we want to make sure you're aware of those definitions. So coffee is a unit.
Warm body.
I've sat in plenty of meetings and went,
Fancy
what does that
language.
mean?
Warm body.
No.
Coffee
I'm
is
biting
a
myself.
measure, a unit of measurement used by the Department of Education, which is how we receive our dollars for our students. And it's basically calculated by the number of minutes a student sits in a seat. So in an elementary school, that's pretty much 100%. They go to school, pretty much one teacher, they stay in the same classroom all day. It pretty much becomes average. At a middle school, it comes in at about 95%. They start getting up, they move from teacher to teacher. Every teacher doesn't have a class all day long. And then when you get to the high schools, you'll find the biggest difference. And that's because you start having dual enrollment. Students start leaving to go to school or go to work or do virtual schools. So when you see a COFD unit, it's not necessarily the number of warm bodies we're serving versus just the number of students in their seats per minute. Then you'll hear us talk about warm body. So that's Rhonda goes to school all day long. Mr. Clinch has to build her a seat because he doesn't know when Rhonda comes to school, is she going to be full-time, part-time, 3/4 of a time? So we have two types of projections. Warm body is if everybody went to school all day long, and then we have what the state requires us to project, which is COFD. We also have a student station. So that's the number of seats a school is designed to accommodate. We have student capacity. The state will say if an elementary school is built at 948, they expect it to hold 948 students. At a middle school, they'll take 10% off, and at a high school, they'll take 5% off. And then the school district itself, we drill it down a little bit further, and we use a term called functional capacity. And that's how we use the school regardless of how it was designed. So for instance, if we have a school that has a higher population of ESE students than we design our schools to hold, if you have 5 classes built at 25 students each, but you have to turn them into ESE classrooms, which hold 10, you're losing 15 seats per classroom. So right off the bat, the school's going to hold 75 less students than it was designed for. So then as the regular population students continue to come in, that could require us to have portables. So you might look on a capacity report and it'll say the school can hold 950, but we only have 800 in it, and then you're going, but why do you have 10 portables in the parking lot? It's because there's other needs in the school that are drawing down the actual size of the classroom and the way it was built, so we're offsetting it with a portable.
So the portables at a school do not mean anything towards its capacity from our standpoint?
Just from a basic 2 + 2 = 4 formula, no. Just because there's a portable does not mean the school is over capacity.
Okay.
And you know how it
That's good
works.
to know.
There's no way you ever have 25 kids in every high school classroom.
Perfect numbers.
Because not everybody's in chemistry.
That's true.
Portables are a necessity of our existence and our growth. When we went to school, there were portables.
Right. We have a ton of
And so it's always going to be there. It's never going to go away because we have to make sure that we have students here before we can build another permanent school or permanent student station. And so it's part of that growth function that we grow into it, then we build another school, we reshift, we readjust, and we grow into it, we build another school.
Yeah, the state does not allow us to build another school until we're basically in.
Until you're in over capacity.
We've got to have, what percentage of the capacity is it when it opens?
It varies from school to school, but we basically call it a minimal school guarantee. So in elementary school, where learning takes about 700 students so that we can stay in the black and make it sustainable. Anything less than that, we start taking from general operating funds to keep it afloat. So we like to make sure the proper number of students are already within our schools and being housed before we build a new school, open it, and then transfer the students over through a redistricting process.
Because there's an important balance between our capital needs and the cost of operating the school. So while we would all love to have perhaps elementary schools of 500 students in our different communities, we can't afford in this district to operate at that size.
So that's something that's set by you guys, not by the state then?
So
And it really differs on.
you guys have the
funding.
exact opposite problem we have. We have operational dollars and lack capital dollars. You have capital dollars and lack
Well,
operational.
but that just changed, or didn't change. It was something that we took care of.
You know, 10 years ago, we had over 800 portables in the
Right.
district. And, you know, that's basically throwing good money after bad, because you're renting space that you'll never own and it's going to wear out and all those types of things. But we didn't have the impact fees at that time to start to make capital investments. That's changed. So now we're probably 250 to 300 portables. And as I was meeting with Mr. Thacker and Mr. Weissar earlier today individually, I said, that's probably a sweet spot, because it allows us to meet the needs of our schools and our current students, start planning for what needs to come next in terms of the next new school based on both growth in the area and current existence. But we're not just throwing away the capital dollars that we want to try to save to build a new high school, for example, which, you know, took 10 years to save the money for Total Life.
And the key to that is, and John, I know you've all seen the capacity report. When something is red and it's over capacity, that doesn't mean it's the end of the world for it. I mean, maybe when you bring in 4 more portables. So there's may mean we're going to build a new school. May mean we're going to redistrict. It doesn't mean we're in a dire situation necessarily, and that's why we want to have this. We can talk about what
Right.
the true meaning of this is.
We use it almost like a thermometer,
Yeah.
right, to
Yeah.
gauge where our temperatures are and where we need to make sure we're aligning or allocating resources and bringing on new schools or new student stations to deal with that. So for us internally, it's used to say, okay, this is the area that's really heating up and we need to make sure we're planning for a new school in this area. It's not a bad thing. It's just a tool for us to identify where the demand is or where it's going to be.
So, Clarence, when you and I met, you were saying that this doesn't calculate in charter schools.
Doesn't count.
Doesn't count that in.
The one that I had did not.
So we just want to clarify that. So in the COFD that we also report, we are only comparing K-12 COFD to district capacity. We track and monitor charter schools. We pull their COFD out and we keep it separate with their capacity. The one reason we will not pull it into our tracking counts, we cannot redistrict to them. We can't control who is going to go to them and who will not go to them. We can't control their openings and closings nor their locations. So the best example I could give right now would be on the east side of town. Creative Inspiration Journey just opened at the entrance of Hickory Tree. Classical opened on, the other one was Old Hickory, so on Hickory Tree behind the 7-Eleven, and then just down behind the old Fred's Auction, we have Mater. Between those three schools right now, they have approximately 1,800 vacant seats. But Narcoossee is full, bursting at the seams, has 5 portables. Harmony Community School, even though we just moved the middle school students out, they're full as a K-5. Hickory Tree, we just added 3 more portables. So if we pulled that 1,800 in, it would look like we need no relief on the east side of the county, but in reality, we're looking at opening a new elementary school called Old Hickory in the Old Hickory Estates, and it's planned to open in 3 years because we want to pull those children out of the portables, and now we have enough growth in that area plus the portables to allow us to open the school. So we don't put their COFD in there to inflate our capacity. We just pull everything about the charter schools out and we keep them on a separate chart.
And until a charter school starts to build, literally
Okay.
digging a hole in the ground, they may or may not show up. Just because they've gone through the process and approvals, a large chunk of them.
And they
Never
will not be able to
They
operate.
can request additional planning years
Right.
and continue to postpone the opening or construction of the school. The other thing too is remember that that's a model that allows for choice and opportunity. So somebody may go to it today, they may go there for
Right.
2 years, and the parents might go, you know what, I don't really like this, I want to go back to the traditional school.
They may go there 2
Or
weeks.
the opposite may be the same with us.
Yeah.
They came to us, and now we have 1,800 student stations at these schools on the east side of town, and parents might say, okay, well, now we actually want to go there because we don't want that.
So I know you're going to tell us how the new formula is going to work, or how it's new
Yes.
percent. That won't mess you guys up with your calculations to the state, right?
Correct. The
It's
bottom
gonna
line
keep
is
you-
the same, we're going to show it to you in a different format.
And I think the reason our board, I guess I'll speak for Todd, we're the ones that get the parents calling, how can you approve that? Did you not see the capacity
Right,
report?
the
Correct.
And it's coming to us, so they think that,
It's a bad
Right.
thing, but
You know,
it's not
like-
necessarily a bad thing.
and what I hear most is, they gave you the information, they showed you their overcapacity, and we're like, okay.
But there's a
we'll deny it.
huge
So
missing
it-
piece to that, too.
Right.
When you build 2,000 homes in an area, we just generated $30 million, 20-something million dollars to build a school. Because of the impact, the fact that we charge the maximum impact fees that we're allowed to charge, we are somewhat de facto concurrent. Because we're generating the money we need. I mean, you could argue whether it's within 10% or whatever, but we're generating the money we need to build a school. Now, we get the money, I mean, that's why we have the portables, is because you know, the kids get there and then you have the money.
It's in the rear.
Yeah, it's not
Right,
like
it's
you
just
get the
coming.
money 2 years in advance.
Right.
Just give
But-
them Tim's cell phone number.
But it's still, that money is there to build those schools, and that's not factored in this. That's telling us they're gonna build 2,000 houses in this area. You better be planning on finding a place and getting your stuff started to build that school. And we built them before. Go ahead, Don. I'm sorry.
Yeah, just a question. I asked to confirm this side of it. Isn't there something related to how you measure school capacity and a tie to your ability through DOE to spend money to build more schools? Is there something like 150% capacity before you can move on to the next, or is there something? I'm not fully familiar with that.
So when we had PICO funds, which we kind of have now, but they're so minimal, we couldn't build a school if we wanted to. We have an annual document we sent to the Department of Education called an Educational Plant Survey. And inside of it is Table 2. So it's similar to what we do here. So you have all your students and all your capacity, and they divide it, and at the end of it, if you had any available seats left, they went, you can't have any PICO money to build a new school. But then once you went over 100%, then they triggered allowing you to build a school. So that's kind of where we get into trouble with COFD versus a warm body. So with elementary and middle, we could kind of keep up and have those seats in good shape. But with the high school, we were always short high school seats because we were getting paid at a COFD versus a warm body. So we were always seeing more portables at our high schools than our elementary and our middle. So it's not quite written that way. We talk about it as if it is, but it's really about a formula that says you got to have more kids than seats before you're allowed to spend money.
And last year, we did get some flexibility with the statutory language that was changed in terms of how we spend our local dollars. So if we're spending our local property value that comes in through the state, or that 1.5 mil, or we're spending impact fees, we have more flexibility to plan for. In the past, any dollars spent on capital projects had to be justified in the Ed Plan survey, which basically required you to consider redistricting from Poinciana to Harmony. Because that's the piece that doesn't make sense, because it looked at the district as a whole. So we might have seats in Poinciana where more charters have opened and there's been less growth. But if you look at a Westside K-8 or a Celebration K-8, there are no available seats. If you look at Harmony, Narcoossee, even Hickory Tree, there are no available seats. And I can't ask kids and transport kids justifiably from Poinciana to Harmony or Celebration, or Celebration to Poinciana to make that work. So we were successful through the state legislative body. This group really
We fought hard
advocated
for
as a
that.
board to get that flexibility, but it still doesn't mean that you could just spend your back capital funds willy-nilly.
And
There's
we were
never gonna
basically
be that
submitting
much.
this plant survey, Mark probably won't say this, but it's not really correct. But we have to submit it the way they tell us to submit it. What we know, going back to warm body and coffee and all that, not to get into that, I mean, we know where the needs are, but the state doesn't allow us to make those decisions.
The
It's correct based on the formula.
It's correct based on the,
It's not
our
functional.
work is
Functional,
correct, but it's not functionally, thank you.
They
Brad.
don't see boundaries, so
Yeah, right.
they think we are going to bust a Poinciana when in reality, we know we're not going to bust St. Cloud. So the report says, oh, you've got plenty of space, but in reality, we know Hickory Tree and Narcoossee and Harmony are not.
And these are statewide rules. There's no consideration for how fast your school district is growing or the county's growing or anything. Be a good chance.
Size fits all.
Right.
Yeah. That's a lot of it is their size.
Wow.
But to your point, Don, you're correct in theory of what it is this process and model is about, is that we won't build the student stations until we know that we truly need student stations. Otherwise, we could think about pre-recession. If this board at the time had the money, which they didn't, and they said, well, hey, we're just booming, we're just going to keep stacking schools and building schools because the growth is here. The recession comes, growth stops, and then all of a sudden you're sitting there with empty, vacant, or underutilized schools. A great example would be the Poinciana community, where Poinciana was booming, and we were fighting to keep up with building schools out there all the time. Now all of a sudden we're sitting there with student capacity space. Not underutilized, but nonetheless, if we would have just kept saying, well, Poinciana is going to continue to grow the way it historically has been, the board at the time would have made an unwise decision. So the model is designed to make sure that no school board in the state of Florida ever gets ahead of themselves and builds or uses taxpayer resources beyond what the true need, demand, and concern is of the day.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And just also for a point of reference, we have two major sources of capital funding. One is the impact fee, and one is the sales tax, half-cent sales tax. They cannot be mixed.
Right.
Impact fees pay for a new student station,
Right.
one that does not exist. The sales tax pays for renovation of existing student stations. So St. Cloud, Michigan Avenue Elementary.
Several other things too, technology.
Yeah, it can pay for some,
other
but
things.
for
Safety, security, hard.
Yep, safety,
But
security.
for as far as building space. So the Michigan Avenue that has been rebuilt, it was built at a higher capacity, so we were able to use both sources. The impact fees paid for the increased stations, the sales tax paid to replace whatever the number was it 600 or something? Roughly 600 spaces, we would use the sales tax. So if it was 60/40, it would have been 60% for 40%. So, but it is very prescriptive on how.
That's where we had to fight hard to get, to be
Right.
allowed to add
Yes.
those student stations.
Right.
Right. How does this play in, though, with the Florida virtual school? I mean, I know you said that they're counted in here, right, or they're not? You said they weren't.
Not
I'm
if they're
sorry.
considered a charter. They're in
Not
a
if they're
different set
chartered,
of-
but so the Florida, so my daughter's in Florida virtual, for example, so she's not counted, for example, at all in this,
She's in the charter, she's in the.
under the charter
class,
school.
Yes.
And so, okay, so that's all of those kids. Thanks.
So, I'm.
Everyone knows what a warm body is.
Everybody
Yes.
knows what a warm body is.
One
We're
thing
all
you
warm
Making
bodies. So I'm pretty sure we all know the green, yellow, red, but we just wanted to point out a few things. In all of our charts, if you see green, all schools stay on our radar at all times, but pretty much a school in the green, they're at 89% or less. We know they're out there, we're monitoring them, but they probably don't have a portable or a co-teach or a floating teacher, et cetera. At Yellow, a school somewhere between 90 and 99%, they're definitely on our radar. Historically, when a school gets around 90%, we start seeing a need for portables, co-teach, teachers on a cart. We start looking at redistricting. We probably start pulling portables in, and it's that kids don't come in a perfect number. We might have a high ESE population. We might have unique programs or academies in the school that are altering the way it was designed, but we're better serving the needs of the community. And then when a school is in the red, we're definitely looking at co-teach, teachers on a cart, portables. We do have some campuses, we've exceeded their green space, so we cannot add more portables. So we're looking at redistricting them as that is our final choice. And then we're kind of back to red isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just means we're now reaching population in an area that we do need to start looking at building a school. If schools within proximity have a little vacancy, we'll redistrict from an existing school to an existing school. It's not always from existing to a new school. For instance, we're currently going through redistricting with Bella Lago Charter because that is a district-managed school. We were allowed to give it an attendance zone boundary. They've currently reached and exceeded their capacity, and we're looking at redistricting them into Sunrise, Pleasant Hill, and Horizon. So because the schools on that side of town are becoming so close to their capacity, we're actually taking one school and redistricting it into 3 existing schools just to get everybody to a balance.
And a quick point on that too, just bear in mind, redistricting isn't a bad thing, and in a lot of ways it's a good thing. So what you think about is we're compressing that attendance zone boundary for the school into a tighter and tighter area. So now the kids are going to a school that's closer to home. It's reducing bus transportation, demand on road infrastructure. It's creating more of a community feel around that school so the students can walk there more. It's creating more compaction and density around it. So sometimes people think of redistricting as a bad thing. My son, my daughter, my child, whoever has always gone to the school, why would you move them? From a governance standpoint, sometimes it's the right thing to do because it's creating the density that we're looking for around that, and we're creating that true school community. Another example, I'll just use you and I. You and I remember being bused from where we lived all the way up to Beaumont, all the way up to Point Siena to OHS, because there were no schools at that time. So as we were able to build more schools, we were able to close in those boundaries through redistricting, and we create a better net result for everybody.
So next we're going to go to the documents that you're familiar seeing in a lot of the Board of County Commissioner packets. So next we're going to the 3-year impact by attendance zone boundaries. That'll also be in the additional packet I gave you, so you can see the full-size chart. So this is a document that is linked to all the previous documents I referred to, like the residential tracker, the permits and CO, and the tract development layer. And it's a quick cheat sheet, so it shows you all of the schools, all of the COFD issued by DOE, the capacity of each school in our district, and the first current level of service tells you that is the snapshot of our schools today. So as you can see, there's a lot of green, means we're in pretty good condition. We have some schools in the yellow, and at this time we have Narcoossee Elementary in the red. So in the next column, you see DOE's projections for COFD for 3 years out. And then in the next column, what we've done is we've taken all of the students projected from 3 years worth of approved FS SDPs using the average of 100 to 125 units per development. We add that to the COFD, and we give you a 3-year look of COFD with impacts. And then we divide that by the available capacity today. So we can see what we look like today and what we will look like in 3 years if we did not open any more schools. So at this stage, we still haven't added any new schools that we know we're going to open. So this is how we know to start looking for future school sites, what part of the county we should be looking at, or whether or not we can redistrict from school to school based on available capacity.
Does the 3-year take into account any additional portables? Because you said that was one of the options.
Well, that's how you get.
That's how we decide where to add portables. At this point, no. So the next page is just a reference page.
Rhonda, before you go on, to
sure.
further add to that, does take into account new wings we might build, space reconfiguration, portables we may add, charters that may come online. It doesn't take any of that into account. That's just our way of saying these are areas we're going to have to start utilizing some of the tools that are available to us to do reduce the current expectation of demand that's coming.
So it may be that while it may look a little more dire, you guys are thinking, oh, next year we're going to add.
This is telling
X
us we
point
need
this.
to be thinking.
Yes.
Of where
I
did
mean, that's what this tool is really for.
We use it as a compass to
What,
guide us in the
two-year
right direction.
construction? in school?
Portable,
No,
you
high
drop them
school.
in.
High
High
school,
school comprehensive.
3 to 4.
Well, you're talking full funding, everything.
From start to
Line.
finish, like, we're gonna, we today are deciding to build a high school. What do you say, Mark? Today, we're deciding to build a high school. How long till it opens?
18 months for greenfield, 22 to 24 or more for phased comprehensive renovation replacement.
Three.
New school, Mark, we
New
don't
school.
have it designed.
Yeah, no design, like, we're starting from scratch today, 0.
I was gonna say, you need to come work for us.
Hey.
An 8-month design if we use a prototype, and an 18 to 24, 22-month for construction.
3 years.
On a greenfield.
3 years.
3 years. Wasn't that far? Okay.
Well, and bear in mind too, some of that also is that it's also building up that savings account that we can even afford to do as well. So we're looking out, we may want a new high school in 3 years, so we say there really could be demand, but we know we can't afford it until 5 years out.
Your dollars
So-
have to stay in the area that they're generated, no?
No,
Impact fees?
Yeah.
no. No, they can-
But why wouldn't you? If that's what
It
So
depends on,
Right.
I mean, for example, some of the growth in Poinciana is probably not going to get spent initially.
But like Rhonda can tell you right now, because we've talked about it, we really need a high school on West Side. And that actually changed a little bit from 3 to 5 years ago when we were really thinking about Neptune Road. Now the focus is West Side. So these plans do change and shift over time, even without getting it done.
Like looking at Narcoossee Middle right now, that'd probably trigger the Toho Middle. I mean,
Potentially.
potentially. I think that's what it's called, I guess, the high school.
It actually looks like potentially Sunbridge.
Okay.
And Cade could go faster
Cade.
than that.
Okay.
Yes.
So could I ask, how could we reasonably read this chart and know what's going on?
They're going to tell us that.
Yeah, they
So,
You're
Well,
not.
this chart
We're
here,
There's something else to
They don't want us to know.
Give me something else to
They
read.
don't want us to under.
we have to make a decision,
Yes.
and if we don't know really, obviously these numbers,
Well, it's part of your report. Part of the issue that's been in the back of it, and I think the discussion our staffs have been having, is how do we make it a more prominent
Yeah.
feature of what you see?
yeah. Okay, so I'll let you
No problem.
keep going.
So this is one of the, for lack of a better word, I'm going to call it a tutorial slide. So when you leave, it'll tell you how to go back and read each of these columns and to know their intent. So this is also in your handout. This is a school capacity report, and this, I'm going to say all of you have seen at some point or time inside of your Board of County Commissioner packet. So the information at the top is just pretty generic. It's the date we receive it through the appropriate entity. We assign it a district number. We identify the jurisdiction that the development is in. We add their assigned number. We give it a project name that comes from the developer's application. We try to give it a location. Sometimes it's very road specific. Other times it's just a geographic area. We're advised what date the comments are due. We apply the acreage. We know its current land use. We know if it's being requested for a new land use, et cetera. So the next set of blocks also comes from the developer's application. So in this particular one, it is for the Andren subdivision on Simpson on South Eagle Road. And the developer's application told us it was 299 single-family units. So when we put that in there, then, Mr. Arrington, you asked earlier where it comes from. So down here at the bottom, in the middle, you see student generation rates. So you have single family for elementary, middle, high, townhomes, multifamily, condo, and mobile home. So depending on where we put the units in the top blocks, it comes down and multiplies by those factors, and then it tells you the number of students. So this development is anticipated to generate 54 elementary, 27 middle, and 47 high school students. If you go to the bottom of the page, we identified the schools this subdivision will go to. So that's Narcoossee Elementary, Narcoossee Middle, and Harmony High School. So the COFD came from the chart before for the 1 year. The permanent student capacity also came from the chart before at 1 year, and it's just a repeat of the way we look today. Then in the next level, 3-year projected COFTE, that also comes from the chart. That number is determined by the Department of Education. Then the one that says projected COFTE with impact, we have taken 3-year COFTE plus all development scheduled through a FS or SDP to permit and CO out within that 3-year window at Narcousie Elementary. So we see they're going to go from about 1,010 students to 1,422. They're going to go from 110% capacity to 141% capacity with this development now included. So this isn't just this development's impact on Narcousie, it's everybody's impact to date that's been approved as an FS or an SDP, and sometimes I think that's where most of the confusion. Everybody thinks the one single development is creating that big of a jump when it's a cumulative approved. And then you can see Narcousie Middle will go from 82 to 97 at that point, and Harmony High School would go from 80 to 106. So this is the way you see the data today. So again, red just means we've got growth going on in that area. We may have portables coming along. We may have new schools. Now in this instance, when we say projected level of service with impact, it has included any new schools that we're going to open in the 3-year window. So they have been accounted for, and we would still see some red, some yellow.
And an important distinction there is any new school that we're personally bringing online, not any new
Not
charter
the
school
charters,
or
okay.
anything like that, which is important. They provide a lot of relief. Nearly 20% of the students in Osceola County are receiving educational services within a charter school right now as well. In addition, the number for the calculation that's used to make that transition, if you will, from the 110 to 141 or whatever it was on there.
Yes.
That also takes into play the historical absorption within that market or within those communities as well. So it's not based on if everything were perfect and amazing and all the units were built. It's based upon historical performance within those communities, within that area, within that attendance zone.
So it shows also the differences, I think, between the parent choice, whether they want to leave the charter, go to the public school, and then, or vice versa. So you have all those tallies in here. I guess I would always think, if I was on this, I would think, how many percentage-wise do we have that change from either public school to charter schools, or vice versa? Is it a big percent that you guys always have to take into account? Is it a small?
No, in fact, my comment, other board members may have a little different take or may share it, is that the trend is reversed some, right? So
Okay.
we have taken a position as a board that empowering parents to make choice in education of what's best for their student is the right approach.
Right.
But at the same time that we're going to make sure we do everything we can to compete at the highest level with anybody and everybody, so that if any parent in the community says, I want to exercise the choice where my kid to go, we want them choosing our schools because we want to make sure our schools, the ones that we're personally responsible for, are functioning at the highest levels possible and have the most innovative programs and opportunities for our kids. So we're working, if you will, to continue to take the spirit of competition and reverse what the initial trend when charters first started coming online was. Because like anything new, when charters became more and more popular in the initial phase, new seemed better and different. And so people were transitioning their students in the charter just thinking different must be better. And now what we're saying is no, that you may choose at a charter's grade, and that's fine for your student. We applaud that. But look at what we're doing as well. And that's where we're constantly trying to work with you guys in the city and all the other partners to say, let's talk about the great things that are happening in the Osceola School District, because there's a lot of hidden gems that people just don't know about.
Now, they were originally, though, set up, just so you know, Commissioner Chowdhury, actually the constitutional amendment or the statute says that the charter school to open had to be innovative and different. Well, basically in Osceola County, they have become relief schools. Not to say that we don't have some innovative and different awesome schools, we do. But think about if every charter school today in Osceola County shut down, 20% of those students would come back online. We the Osceola County School District, the taxpayers of Osceola County, would have to provide a student station for them. I don't know how we do it. It would, Rhonda would pull all her hair out probably. But
And that was like kind of my question, like being nervous of whether or not you have a big bulk of students perhaps changing from the charter to the traditional schooling, and that's why I was asking.
I'm not nervous about it. I don't know if anyone else.
Does it mostly happen though from elementary and middle? I could see in a charter, and then the parent decides I want to high school education for them or let them experience high
Right.
school, that would be
Yeah.
the one I think would be probably the most popular.
Just
We
switch.
currently
Lower
have
grades
only
are.
2
Yeah.
charter school programs that offer high school academics, New Dimensions, which has been
Right.
highly successful but remained small and kind of true to their mission. I think that's one of the reasons why they are so successful. And then you have Matter,
Right.
who is starting to build a high school program, growing from their K-8 to the 9th grade. Where we tend to lose the most students to charters is really middle school right now. Middle schools kind of have a bad rap, highly
Right.
undeserved, I would say. I think the programming and the offerings that we have in our middle schools definitely speak for themselves. But that's where people get nervous and really like that K-8
Right.
opportunity, so that kids are in that smaller, closer environment for a period of time. And, they think they're not going to have the middle school angst, but 12-year-olds are 12-year-olds.
They have the high schools have the extracurricular opportunities.
Well,
for
and remember
experience
too,
limited to-
what it costs to build a comprehensive high school. So when you go to a high school, think about the football stadium, the gym,
Right.
all the
the
extra
extras,
programs
yeah. Theater.
that are theater, drama, all the things that we as a community invest in. It's really hard for a charter to make that investment and then be able to be financially sustainable.
I see.
Yeah, something I'd like to ask Rhonda, and hopefully you won't throw anything at me
Oh,
with
no,
regard
not
to.
at all.
I'll stay away from you. Just
No,
like
that's
she
good.
does.
Well, I didn't really have a chance to go through the presentation either, but something that might help the commissioners, I think, with regard to the report, and you might have this coming up, is under the table, you've got the 3-year projection.
Yes, sir.
If you're able to add a column that had everything that was permitted so far, but not part of this particular application, that would show a percentage of capacity overrun. Then if you showed that particular application, it would be a smaller percentage growth, so the commission could at least see the growth of the context of this application and not the overall growth of everything else that's permitted out there.
Okay. So you'd like to see just this impact?
So if you just
and then
took this,
the
just if you
impacts
just
combined?
yeah, if you just added one column to it and just had what the current impacts are without this particular development application,
Okay,
and that would be inserted before the last, and they could see the overall.
I understand. Okay.
Ron, I want to walk through some comparison on this thing. I'm
Sure.
looking at the one that's got Harmony High School on the bottom.
Yes.
The bullshit, I think it's the third one in your packet. This is showing, based on our growth, that Harmony High School is going to grow by 601 students, if I did that math right.
Well, they're going from,
1862.
their coffee's going from 1862 to 19.
I thought with the impact.
Oh, but with the impacts, they're going to, yes, they're going to
Which
2463.
is 601 students. Based on our student generation rate for a single-family home, if these were all in single-family homes, which in that area, there's probably more of that than anything else, we would have to build 0.154 kids per. It would take 3,900 homes in the Harmony School District coming out of the ground in 2 years
3 years.
to generate those 601 schools. We don't build 3,900 in the county in a year, right now. I don't think.
Yeah, it's 4,600.
Yeah.
No, there was 46 permits. I think there's only 3,400.
27,000.
I don't remember what the number. Anyway, I don't think we're building 3,900 in 2 years.
But this
It
includes
should.
apartments as well, which
Right.
carry a much higher
Right.
generation rate, yes.
Yeah.
She
But
said-
I don't know how many apartments are in that, but it's a lot. It's because we front-loaded. I mean, Harmony's been being built for 15 years. I mean, I think there's probably a few developers in here would like to build out their subdivisions in 2 years or 3 years. So there's a piece of this too. It gets back to kind of understanding the report. There's a piece of it on the way the report is generated, because it's an indicator for us that's not complete reality on how it will come out. If that makes any sense.
Also, you said you were, at the beginning, I think you said you were looking at 200 active. But it
Last
doesn't
year, we
mean-
were looking at
Subdivision.
200.
We've
Right
seen
now, I
some
can
of them
tell
get
you it's
approved and never move
249.
ahead.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
there's things that now we're seeing come out of the ground that none of us were ever elected when it was approved.
Correct.
I mean,
And that's factored in there as well. Remember that this number and that correlation is showing based upon actual performance of absorption from the marketplace. So that number is not taking into account if, there's 27,000 units approved. That's not what that's looking at. It's only based upon actual performance within that geographic area.
So the next slide is, it just gives you a reminder of how to read the information. So this is the new proposed way we would like to report the data and see if it gets to an end result that you believe will better guide you when you're trying to make decisions, help the developers, and help the planning staff. So
This is full size.
what we've done is we've now taken Osceola County and we've divided it into 10 planning study areas on this
This is
map.
in the smaller packet, that's where you can read it.
No, we don't have that. That's why we made the full-size copies.
I know I got glasses. It's too small.
So what the map is displaying is we've taken all of the counties, we've taken the county and turned it into 10. So now we've started compiling information. So planning area 1 will be all schools in planning area 1 plus all development in planning area 1. And then if you go to this new tracker, we started compiling information. So we'll just go through the elementary section. So I'm going to call it a tab because it's a tab on my computer, but the elementary tab shows planning study areas 1 through 10. And if you total them together, there's 23,272 elementary COFD in planning area 1. We have 29,056 capacity seats available. So the current level of service in planning area 1 for all elementary students is 80%. In 3 years, their COFD is projected to be at 24,029. We're anticipating about 2,866 new elementary students. That gets us to a new impact of 26,895. So we're going to go from 80% capacity to 93% in 3 years. And then if you go to the last 3 year, we're going to add in the new schools we anticipate actually opening in that 3-year period. And you can see we will now bring that zone back down to 84%.
The numbers you're doing is totals, though.
But now we're doing totals.
Right.
Instead of attendance zone boundaries, we're trying to just to divide the county into 10.
Disregard my earlier comment. Yeah.
See, okay. I was hoping for positive feedback. So then if you take the school capacity report, it's the same setup, except at the bottom, instead of school names, you see elementary, middle, and high. And we've added planning study area. So this development happens to be in planning study area 5. So right now, the elementaries in planning area 5 give you 110% level of service. In 3 years, we expect them to be at 148%. And this is the Narcoossee corridor, so there is a lot going on inside of that Narcoossee corridor. The middle school combined capacities would go from 82% to 94%. And since we currently do not have a high school in planning area 5, that's why you see nothing there. But those students are either going to Tahopacliga High or they're going down inside of Harmony High. So what we've done here is we're just now trying to show you an average of all the schools in that vicinity versus pinpointing down to something much smaller like an attendance zone boundary. These would always stay set. Where our attendance zone boundaries, we actually revisit them every year. So in June, we could bring you a capacity report that says Narcoossee Elementary is 140%, but maybe we redistricted it effective July 1, and the very next day a developer could come through, and because we just redistricted Narcoossee, it might show them at 84%. And I think the average person's going to go, well, how did you go from 148 to 84%? And it's all because we shifted students from a redistricting plan.
Yeah, because if you look at planning area 5 and 10, which are both based on this overcapacity, but then if you factor in planning area 4 and 9, if you did redistricting, you're actually at 100% on all 4.
Right. So this is kind of the direction we would like to go versus the direction we've been in, and we were looking for feedback to see if this is more the direction you would like us to go. If that is the case, probably what we will do while we're finishing up our annual visits, we'll probably stop issuing the old school capacity report through November 1, unless it's for a community of about 750 or more. Typically, right now, developments of that size is when we're starting to ask developers to let us dedicate a school site within their community. We like to stress dedicate, not donate. We don't expect developers just to give us land free and clear. We'd love for them to, but we understand.
There's a lot of wood right there.
We under-
Raising hands.
We understand that's not realistic, but the larger developments, we kind of like to work more with the neighborhood school concept, and we like to generally ask for K-8s, so that's anywhere from 25 to 30 acres. So if we saw a development come through at that size, we would issue the report just so you would know that's the developer we want to bring to the table for a one-on-one. But for now, if you're good with us maybe not issuing the old report up through November 1, just to kind of relieve some of the confusion that there's been, because we can't initiate this new one until all the new data's in, and that would be November 1.
I think going back to what Commissioner Hawkins was saying, it's like we hear from the parents also just
Yes.
as much as I'm sure the school board members do.
Yes.
And the hesitation is always like we keep approving developments and we don't know the impact of the school. Do we understand it and all? And conversations on our board have been, do we stop it? How, if we do, what is it that we need to do and go from there? But what I'm hearing from the school board is you folks are comfortable, or at least that's kind of what I'm getting. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but comfortable with the way that it's grown, that we are growing, and that the growth is okay. That we are okay even if it's on the red, because it doesn't mean it's dire need, but it does mean that it needs to be attended to.
That's really
I just
the
want to
gra-
make
that's
sure
the
that
really
I
the-
grasp what is the message.
I wouldn't say that.
No, okay, that's what I want to
wouldn't use the word
hear.
comfortable.
Okay,
What I would use is that we can get it done.
okay,
And this board can get it done because the community has supported us. And we've made tough decisions to have the highest impact fees in the entire state. That's why we can get it done. I don't think neither one of those things make me comfortable. So to use the word comfort, I think is
Okay.
a stretch for me.
okay.
Okay.
But
I don't
we can
disagree.
get it.
I wouldn't say comfort's the right word either. But can we, with what we have right now, keep up with it? I think today, yes. I mean, who knows what could happen with construction costs or anything else in a year. But I don't think, 3 years ago, the answer to that would have been no. But we've put some stuff in place that's been pretty painful to a lot of people. It has clearly not stopped growth, which is what we were told would happen when we did it. I believe it slowed it down. It hadn't been a whole lot. So, like I say, we do have things in place, and when we deal with developers and everything else, and when we charge those highest impact fees, that's what they're for.
Right.
And I would add the little different take on that. So first of all, part of the reason why we're able to build schools and add capacity right now is because we have a robust economy that's been humming, and we have a lot of private capital being invested in the community, and that growth and development is what's enabling us to continue to move forward.
Okay.
As mentioned earlier, we have to make sure that we continue to receive the revenue to pay for the impacts that have already taken place as well, because as Commissioner Hawkins pointed out, it is in arrears when you think about it, right? We can't build it and they will come. They have to come before we can build it. And so when you start thinking, when you start thinking about, well, if we slow down growth, we slow down development, we're helping the school district, it actually is the exact opposite. Because as you slow down, what happens is our sole revenue stream, or our main revenue stream for new growth and development and new capacity, goes away. And the biggest indicator of that is what happened in the recession when growth and development did disappear, did go away, and did slow down to next to nothing. The school district at the time felt significant financial impacts and had a backlog of student capacity needs that brought us ultimately to the place of where we were as a board 5 years ago and having to work through some of that. So I'm comfortable with it, and I'll use that word because I understand, not that they don't, by the way, but I understand what our funding formula is and how dependent upon it we are. It's a dig without being a dig.
Got that?
But how dependent upon we are. So I look at it and say that our economy, good, bad, or indifferent, is heavily dependent upon growth and development. We know that. That's been one of the lifebloods of our economy for a long time. And the cash throw-off that comes with that as well, not just with a new home being built, but then the new furniture being purchased and the Best Buy purchases and the sales tax revenue and all those other pieces all come into the overall financial equation of how it is that we sustain ourselves as a community, in this case as a school board.
Right.
Cheryl's got a question in Vivian.
So can you go through, like, what staff from the district is in the process, our county process, to kind of clue us in on how integrated you are in the process or not integrated in the process? Because one of the questions and one of the discussions was having these actually go to the school district for their approval versus just the county commission. But, so if you could talk about that.
So, sorry, somebody coughed, so I didn't hear the first part of what you asked. So you want to know how we
How
interact
How
with?
integrated are you in the process?
Yes.
Pre-apps, whatnot,
Yes.
planning commission.
So all developer applications come to us, so we actually sign into your program with the username and password. We see every application across the county, commercial or residential. Commercial, we just go no impact. Unless by chance there's certain establishments being built within so many feet of a school, then we do have to let you know certain establishments can't be built within that proximity. We are at every DRC meeting. We have a staff member there. We do not go to the table every time. So like if it's a food truck or a church or something like that, we just stay back in the handful of chairs. But Jose and Joshua, Jane, everybody knows, all of the staff. They make sure the developers know we're there. If we're actually trying to mitigate, we go to the table and have the discussions there. We start as early as pre-app, but not everybody goes to a pre-app and not everybody goes to a zoning. So sometimes we don't get contact with a developer until we see their preliminary.
So when you said mitigate, what would be a circumstance where you go to the table for?
So right now we're using a marker of about 750 dwelling units or more. That's when we'll start asking for a school site. We do have smaller developers who say, you know, obviously we're too small to dedicate a school site. Can we help you in another way? So we do have a developer who's currently helping us with some signalization, helping us realign our bus loops or add parking and queuing to our parent lines. So there's usually a way that everybody can help us with some type of mitigation, but typically we're looking for dedicated school sites, especially out west. We have one school basically serving that entire side of the county, that's west side. It's designed for about 1,200 students. It's been as high as 1,800. It has 22 portables, but it's sitting in prime tourist commercial. Nobody wants to sell, and those who do want to sell, it's just at a rate we absolutely cannot afford. So any assistance that we could get from the county with the developers to help us acquire property on that side of town, that's kind of where we need the counties and the cities to come in.
So when it's a smaller development, there's still an ask of the developer if you know, like you said, the queuing lines or something along those lines, and that's
Yes.
something our staff and your staff work together.
We work with them on that. We're at all DRC. We're at the Planning Commission. We actually all have a nameplate. We juggle the meetings. Your department calls and asks who's going to be there. That's the nameplate they put up. And we actually have people at every Florida County Commissioner meeting. They typically sit in the back. But
They don't let us know.
if we're not going to be there, we do let your staff know, and we do that as well with the city of Kissimmee and the city of St. Cloud. So I have one staff member that 68% of their time, they're at a meeting of some type, and the other staff member, 48% of their time, is sitting at either a DRC, a pre-app, or some type of development meeting. So we do feel they're covered. There are a few occasions where we can't be there, but we always call and follow up. Or like today, City of Kissimmee, we couldn't be there. We called them ahead of time. They said, it's okay, we don't see anything that you need a representative there. So we do try to keep all doors open.
So if we have a development that's coming before our commission and a school capacity issue comes up, such as it has,
Yes.
there would be someone potentially in the audience that we
99.9%
could
of
call
the
and
time
say,
there's
someone
going to
from
be
the
somebody there.
school district here that could come up and explain this.
Oh, absolutely. And that did happen at the Planning Commission 2 weeks ago. I went up a couple of times to explain what was being presented. Yes.
And that request is an important part because our staff or myself or anybody that may be there doesn't just get up and speak just to speak. We want to make sure we're only responding to the question of the commission or the council respectively, whatever it may be.
Vivian?
Yeah, so I want to get back to the new
The new way?
the new way. Couple of observations from first class. I think it makes a lot more sense, especially because you're able to redistrict students from one space and the other. So since you're making these areas smaller, potentially you could shift one student in area one to another school in area one. So I like that aspect. However, for me as a commissioner, I don't know how everybody else feels, I still feel like what this report is representing and what I'm hearing right now are two conflicting stories, because I'm seeing still a lot of red, but I'm hearing, well, don't stop anything. We want all these new houses because we want the impact fees because they'll cut off our funding sources. So in a way, it's almost like, should we even look at this at all? Because we spend a significant amount of time. I know I do. I don't want to speak for anybody else. I'm sure other fellow commissioners do too, looking at this information and going through it and seeing if we're going to negatively impact. We all get calls from parents saying, what are you doing? This school is already at 118% capacity and you are adding 200 homes. And I have no way to justify it. And if you're still going to do this and I'm still going to see red, then why should I even look at it? Because you're just telling me, just keep it coming. That's a translation.
Myself,
Oh,
but
thank you.
Yeah, being the newer member, but we can't actually build anything until we are over capacity. Is that what I'm understanding? So we have to see red. Otherwise, we can't actually do anything about it.
So yeah, I know, but for us, then why should we even look at this? I mean, I don't see what the value is.
I have that answer.
I just say, let them approve it and don't even give me this.
Well,
That's what I would
because
say.
they're going through the steps, yeah.
You guys approve it at your level, it adds like another week to the developer going through the process or something, and then that's not even on our
Yeah,
report.
because if you guys are okay with it, I
Yep.
mean, we are okay with it, but if this is what we're looking at, I don't ever know whether
But here's the
you're
deal,
okay
Rhonda,
with
if you
it or
don't
not.
mind. Here's the deal, because we're sitting here talking about schools, but it's not just about schools. When you guys are making the decision, it's not. It's about roads, it's about parks, it's about police, it's about fire. This report is painting part of that picture, and it can't be it's not the whole picture. It's just part of the picture that has to be painted that then you have to go as a commission and make a decision.
Okay, so when I'm looking at this, I'm not looking at fire, I'm not looking at roads, I know all that. When I'm looking at this, I'm looking at schools and the parents' calls if we have capacity at the schools and what are we doing overcrowding all these kids and we already have portables and blah, blah, blah. So that's what, just so you know, that's what we're hearing.
Because what you said first, I would take some disagreement with that. We're just like, go for it, do it all, because that's certainly not where I'm at.
From your perspective, what I just heard is we need you to continue building houses so we can get impact
You did not
fees
hear that from me.
Because, well, this board.
You might have heard it from Tim, but not
this
her.
board. So for me, the message is very confusing, and I'm with Commissioner Hawkins. I would rather see a piece of paper saying, this development is okay with the school board or
Commissioner,
not
can I help
approved
out
by
with that?
them.
Yeah, I think I see what you're saying. So maybe a way could be that none of the other departments attach data and analytics to the agenda memorandum, which is what you're talking about. It's the document you see coming forward. Could it be, or would it suffice for the commission to make their decision that just like other staff departments, and there's out there now, as a matter of fact, but elaborate a bit on a verbal description of what the analytics said, and let's not do the attachment. So, school district, we reviewed this and find that there's sufficient capacity or projected capacity to accommodate approval of this development, and just leave it at that.
So at the bottom of the form, there's a comment section, and that's where we put our comments.
But that could be pull that out and put that in the report, and the report doesn't go along.
Right.
Unless somebody wants to see a copy of it.
Well, it
That's
sounds
my understanding. They're taking our comments and putting them inside of the staff
No, we're seeing-
report. So as long as those comments continue to make it into the staff report, it may not be necessary for our supporting document to go all the way through the process, as long as our comments still.
So you're
make
already
it
doing it, so it wouldn't be a.
That's what-
We have been including it. We can just put it in a more prominent spot for the commission if you want to see it, no?
Just like our planning commission. It's either approved in a 5-0 vote.
Staff recommends approval, and staff.
School board recommends approval at a 5-0
I don't
vote.
think the school board needs to be, I mean, I don't know about the rest
I
of this,
just-
but I don't know.
Just, no, I just wanted to make, I just wanted to answer the question that you asked us.
Yes, thank you.
I think that I think that you're reasonable in your conclusion. I mean, there's a difference between what, how a board member may view growth and their opinions thereof, but as a school district,
Yes,
the way
the school
it
district.
works out, the way it works out is exactly as been described. Once the capacity reaches, and we have to be over capacity in order to, by statute and law, be able to adjust to that growth. And like Mr. Weissayer explained, the economics of it works, so we know how to handle that. The whole purpose here, though, is more for your benefit and how you reach the balance and how you want to do that growth. The schools are just going to react, and this is the way that we plan for it ahead of time. In other words, when we see the red, and if you approve those, then that just goes ahead and triggers what we have to do, and hopefully the money is there in order to accommodate that growth from the school side. Everything else is not something that we're going to be privy to.
Okay,
That's where you come in.
So, excuse me, let me just, if I could.
Your
just go ahead.
reaction this time was saying don't deny development based on school capacity.
Well, because you don't have to. Your analysis on development doesn't have to do, it's not going to be a school, it's going to be part. This is just a balance of everything together. This is just telling you, well, here's the impact
We
of the
handle
school.
fire, we handle parks, we handle roads. We know that because we live that every day. I don't live the school capacity, and that's what I'm
And
saying.
now-
If you vote on it and it's 5-0 and it comes to me, I'm like, all right, I'm worried about school
Let's
capacity.
move
I'm
beyond
gonna look at roads.
finish her
Yeah.
train of thought here.
Yeah, so, I totally understand what you're saying and how you have to be in the red and you have to be over capacity because you need the students before you can build a school. That is not in question here. What is in question here is that why are we receiving this information if for us, we can't make,
And
this
that's
is
why,
useless
that's
for
why
us.
we're having this
meeting.
conversation.
Well, that's
Because you're probably
why-
not going to get it anymore.
Well, that's why.
No, you have to.
So we have an
And
interlocal
there is a
agreement.
narrative side to it.
Yeah, there's an interlocal agreement due to Florida statute, and we have a public school facilities element where we have to interact, and we are required to report the impact of development on schools.
But you're not required to attach the report to the
Right,
public process.
So once we give you the
Yeah.
report, if you cut
we
and
have
paste
it, we
our
did.
comments,
And-
we're good, but we have,
To maybe help with
keep-
Commissioner Hawkins,
Yeah.
if you get this would work for you, may or may not. But no,
I'm with Janer.
it's a language word. I think I was trying to understand what you're getting to, like planning commission approval. What if you no objection to the approval?
My only concern is I just don't want to add more to the system. What I'm thinking is, what Commissioner Greaves' question about the communication between the county and the staff of the school board, it seems like you said you're pretty much at every meeting. You give your inputs. There's discussions. The board reviews. So all of that is being taken already into consideration. So I think a simple right to the other point, instead of seeing all this, I think for us would be everything has been done because you're already doing it, and what's the final conclusion?
Yeah.
And that's it. And then we can say all the other elements and add those elements. I'm not talking like, I don't want to add another extra step. I think what's being done, it seems like all the communication's being done. On our side, it seems like we just want a more simple, like, yes, this was reviewed, all the steps were taken, therefore, this is what the final school board
But
said.
I think that's why we're having this meeting, Mr. Thacker, if you don't mind, is so that you do have an understanding of where these numbers come from, how they're calculated.
Which is
and then-
helpful.
And then you take that through your process, and then you make your decision. We can say, yes, we have impact fee money, yes, we have the sales tax of money, or yes, we have this, yes, we have this. But then you ultimately, as a commission, have to take all those other things into account, including this thing, which
I
now
agree.
you understand better.
No, and
And then you
I'm
make your
grateful
decision.
for the information. I think this does help me now. I understand the red more because, again, I was also nervous when citizens call us and say, we're in the red, and so now I understand that a lot better. And I think
Do we need to
just
change the color to magenta or something?
I think to Mr. Fisher's point as well, the narrative does exist. It's on the planning commission reports. It's at the tail end of these reports that are there.
And
This
the
right here will
brown box.
have a short summary. It says, here's what the impact is, and by the way, we're already planning to build a wing. We're planning for this year. So that piece is there. I think maybe, Don, to your point, it's just how it's moved and how it's presented so that you guys aren't focusing as much on the technical piece of how our staff is working through the data and computations, and instead focus on the short narrative that says, here is what is or what isn't the impact of approving this. It's short, it's concise, it's there, I've read it.
Clarence, if I can jump
Yeah,
in.
go ahead.
Two quick questions, on your site, PSA 2 and PSA 8. Obviously, those are two areas that, in my understanding, don't have any schools, and that's why they obviously have zeros and all everything. How's that going to look?
Well, so in 8, we have several future school sites already dedicated because
Okay.
that's part of the East of Lake Toho.
Yeah.
So until they come online, so for instance, Kindred has already mitigated a K-8, and Tohoqua has mitigated a K-8 and a high school site.
Okay.
And we're currently in discussions with Edgewater, so then as they come along, but the zeros are more, none of those
Population
developments are
growth, yeah.
coming through,
Okay.
so that's why you're not seeing anything.
And then for PSA 2, which obviously is a unique boundary
Mhm.
with Intercession City and some of the stuff out towards County Line Road and Champions Gate.
Right.
There again, I don't know of any schools in
We're
that area.
looking at property in that area, but currently, no.
Okay, so
Yes.
how will that, specifically, a development came through on Point Santa Boulevard recently.
Mhm.
And looking at this, it was very similar.
I know which
It
one
was
you're
very
talking about.
similar
Mhm.
to what the bottom bar of this looks like.
Right.
So how would that look then if you're taking PSA 2 here on this impact report, and is it, do you understand what I'm saying? Everything's zeros, right? And
It
so
would
you'll just say
show, well, so like the
adding-
high school on that one is
Mhm.
zeroed out because over here in 5, we don't have a high school. So it's going to show it's in the red, but only because we don't physically have a school in there.
Okay.
So we would reach out to the adjacent planning service areas to relieve that, or we're either looking to build a school in that area as that number gets higher and higher and
Okay,
higher.
but until that time, that'll
It's
be
a
a wide one to
redistricting,
see,
yes.
right?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes.
I had a chance to talk to Clarence before we met for this meeting, and I appreciate y'all bringing us in and talking to us about your formula, because that's what we're talking
That's
about.
what it
is
is,
your
yeah.
formula that serves you all for your calculations. And granted, I mean, it doesn't matter what color you're making, but towards any time you see it on a piece of paper and it's glowing red from our standpoint, what's that mean? Not good.
Problem.
And so it's not good. So, but there again, I did not understand your calculations, your formulas, or your mindset. And y'all can stop me if I'm wrong here, but my understanding from the school board is you all have the functionary capacity to continue to build schools as development comes on between your sales tax and your impact fees, correct?
Correct.
That's how you all feel. So you feel good that you can cover any new school creation no matter what the development happens in this community. No?
Good wouldn't be,
Because land is becoming
Yeah,
the
that's-
problem. The ability
that's
to
gonna
acquire
be
land
another issue.
is
Okay.
truly becoming, and we really do need assistance with that.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was going to touch on, that's a great point, Commissioner, is when you look at a mixed-use development that requires to have a school right in the urban center, the amount of dollars it will cost for us to acquire a site of scale to be able to operate a school from a minimum student functioning standpoint, it's actually not possible for us. We can't spend $500,000 an acre to buy property and build a 60-acre school or a 30-acre school. So some of that would come from the county commission and how you look at the land development code and what the siting standards are going to be and where it is that we're going to be required to put it. And then part of what our board's been working through a lot lately is, as the market has continued to be as strong as it has, land values have continued to go up, and it makes it more difficult for us. The one concern I think that you'll find universal from all 6, from the school board or school district perspective, is that all of these other pieces and parts, we've built in our processes for it. The one biggest challenge right now is the rising land costs and our inability to acquire land in the right areas at a price that's actually sound for us.
So when will that actually impact you when you get down to one of these?
We're probably
The
there on the
Celebration High
west
School's
side.
full.
Do you know what I
The
mean?
west side of the county.
From our standpoint, so if I'm taking that comment seriously, and that we understand land is going to be an issue, and that means you may not have the capital means in order to create the new schools. So when does that become alarm bells to you guys that you then ring to us? Because I want to make sure. I'm fine if you
Dinging
create
the
more
bell today.
commentary,
Yeah.
but I need, and I'm sure everybody else does, that certainty that you can do it. You know what I mean? I don't want to approve a development at 146 capacity and then you come back and be like,
So what we do.
No way we're building that school.
In that
So what's
situation,
that?
we literally write in the brown box, we are requesting that this development be placed on hold until we can reach mitigation.
Okay, y'all have yet to do that? at
We've
any
done
time,
it,
or have y'all?
and we work with your staff to get through those.
Okay.
You've done it before, then
Yes.
you've already recommended
I
that.
haven't
Yes.
never seen that.
Because by the time it gets to you,
usually doesn't make it to
should-
you before
Yeah.
discussed.
Yeah, it doesn't get
It
to
should
us,
be
okay.
resolved by the time you see it. So then we'll flip the comment to say, this developer has now dedicated for future purchase X amount, and you'll actually see the mitigation agreement come through as part of your approval of that development at its final plat, et cetera. But we have been known to place developments on hold as a last resort until we can resolve that.
So y'all can function that way and you have in the past?
We have so far.
So if there is that issue of site capacity and cost, you
We start
as a
reaching
group
out.
will
It's
step
the
up
same
and say
thing that
something?
happens
We start
before it
reaching
gets-
out.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think there's a great add to that. Go ahead.
Peggy's got it.
So I was just, is that why, because you said the west side was the main concern with the land purchase due to the cost of rising, the
Yes.
rising cost. So is that where the focus is, or is it just in general the whole focus that you mentioned regarding do that partnership with the development that may have the acreage to sell to you? Like where is that?
The west is definitely our primary concern right now. We're starting to fill it in the east along the Narcoossee corridor. Some of those properties are getting to a level that we're not able to acquire them either. So it just kind of, but tourist commercial is very tough for us to acquire.
Yeah.
And then in your mixed use, as Tim was saying, the land development code requires us to put a high school in an urban center. So if the developer wants to give us or work with us on something outside of the urban center, it requires us to come through and ask for a change. But some of the land development code specifically states the only place we can place a school. And as Tim says, we can't afford, and the developer probably doesn't want us to put a high school inside of their urban center. They'd rather it be commercial.
Right.
Yes.
Well, they
So
might
we need to work on those types of things as well.
Right, like work on some types of partnerships on that
Yes,
level.
ma'am.
So 750 is kind of your threshold number,
Yes, sir.
and multiple developers stay under that.
Yeah,
So-
that's why I was asking earlier.
I
about
mean,
The example there is,
What's
we
your
have
all in, I guess?
We have asked multiple, when we see that coming, because sometimes they do come together close enough, we can start seeing that picture. We have asked multiple developers to come together. You know, if you each do 3 acres instead of one of you doing 25 acres. So far, we've not been successful in that situation. They don't
That's
seem to want to come together and talk together and work together.
That's
So-
what I was going to bring up, Commissioner, is that when we use that set, it's literally where I was going. That 750 threshold is the number we look at. We say, okay, this size and scale of a community, we know will trigger that we're going to need a dedicated site in there, and we'll pay for it through impact fee credits and everything. Where the county commission and the county staff, I think, can help the school district is that when you're seeing the stacking of smaller developments within a confined geographic area, that we know that from a just a pure number standpoint, you can't take 25 acres out of a 50-acre development for a school or a 100-acre development for a school. That's where you guys can help, making sure that our staff is keyed into that conversation and try to help facilitate conversation with the development community. Say, is there a way, as we approve these 3, 4, 5, 6 communities in this geographic area, that there could be a partnership created for the school board to buy some property in conjunction with all the property owners?
So the old DRIs were laid out pretty much that way, school sites. You guys have that same agreement with Sunbridge?
Yes, we do.
You've already
They've
worked
already
out
dedicated
how
a
many-
K-8 inside of there,
Okay.
yes.
Sure.
But I also heard that you're saying where we're talking about urban schools, you're saying they don't work for you. That's what we're looking for.
Well, in an urban center. so-
Well, staff's been communicating with us, been going on, so in or adjacent to an urban center, so it doesn't necessarily have to be directly within one. And we can work with, we know that schools are an important component of that, we can work with you on that side of it.
Well, in one of the theories, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the school sites in these centers do not need to be as large because there can be community, I don't know what you call them, parks, fields, soccer fields, softball field,
Joint use.
baseball. So they don't all have to be on the school property. And I like that concept, I understand the concept. But I haven't seen it yet where somebody said, we're going to put a football stadium over here. We're going to spend $12 million on a football stadium or whatever. So I just don't know how that, logistically, that's gonna work, because I'm all for that. I mean, I'd much rather build a high school on 10 acres or 12 acres, and somebody else owns the football field and the baseball fields and the softball fields and the soccer field, and grasses them and feeds them and fertilises them and waters them. I mean,
Well, I do think that the biggest issue hearing, other than, I don't know if we come to terms about how we're going to report this in agenda items, but I think the biggest issue to keep track of whether the county commission takes a position of voting no is around this idea of aggregating smaller subdivisions, and maybe a role that we could play as staffs is to identify areas of concern and begin people letting know that this is an area of concern to us, development community. So there's going to, if you can't figure it out up front, we're going to start recommending through a queue from the school district. County Commission, we won't put it on consent. County Commission recommending denial of this because there's not a school site in the area.
That would be great if we could get help with the
So
smaller
you
combined.
probably could do that for West Side and Arcousie now.
Yeah.
Yes, we're getting to that point, yes.
I know it's getting late, and you got a lot of people out here. I appreciate, once again, I appreciate you guys bringing it. I don't mind this report. I would tell you move the commentary to the top, make it a lot bigger and bolder.
Just to be seen, just to be seen first.
And be honestly, be in depth. It represents you guys, and if someone
Yeah,
calls
detail.
Commissioner Janer and says it's 146%, she can go, I'll send you the paragraph from the school district on the report on the schools, and she can send it over. I think that would be beneficial. I think it's probably smart from the developer standpoint, how you guys have broken it up into 10 and not specific schools. I think that makes sense.
Yeah, like this is-
And as long as, I mean, and I think I've got faith now, hearing that you guys aren't going to just let everything happen. And that if there is an
Yeah.
issue, you will raise some concern. Because honestly, when we look at this, and I was one of the people that looked at this.
yeah, we're involved in the process.
And I mean, it just looks, without education, it looks crazy. You know what I mean? When you see 146% within a 3-year
Yeah, we
period.
can't do that.
I mean, that seems impossible. So I think if we can get the commentary, bigger board up top. If this works for y'all, keep doing it for you guys. I mean, you can put it on there, but I think the commentary's where I'm gonna probably land. And I think if we can work on some of those school sites like Don talked about, we make people build roads into pastures, well, maybe make people give us 10 acres here and 10 acres next door to make a school happen.
It's not even about giving.
Well, no,
Right,
but
it's just
designating
getting
it
it.
as
Dedicating.
designated.
That's the
Sell
world we
to
like.
us at a price that
But-
is
Oh, come on,
reasonable.
From my standpoint also, it doesn't also mean that just because if we're going to build 3,000 multifamily units and we're going to get all that impact fee money that we would be for it, because I think ultimately, I can tell you sitting over here, that would definitely not be, unless somehow you're adding value to the community. So again, it's all about working together, this board working together, saying, hey, this is good, this is not good. Hey, there's road transportation situations, there's fire and sure, but that's what you guys have to handle. We'll handle the school stuff. But again, and I said this at our first meeting when we first discussed this, paint the picture is what we need to do, and paint the right picture. And then we were like, hey, we got to get these guys in here so we can explain. Because it took, I'm going to be honest, I had to sit down with Rhonda when I first got on the school board and learn all this stuff.
And lean on us, I think, is important to note as well, meaning that, you know, I can almost guarantee you every single school board member has received a call about law enforcement, about transportation, about ingress, egress. And our response, at least I know mine, I think everybody's is, you know, that's not an area that I oversee. Let me reference the county commissioner, and you're glad to call them. You guys don't have to be the education experts. You can just defer all those calls to us. That's why we have a school board and a county commission. And so if a parent calls you asking or upset or not understanding the report, make them call Clarence. No, seriously.
It's always Clarence.
That's why we have the government bodies that we have, and the school board will deal with the complaints and concerns of the parents as we do, and you guys will deal with the safety and the roads and all the other components that you're responsible for. And then in partnership, we serve the community in the best way possible.
I had one question about something you said you denied earlier, and if it's a real long explanation, I can wait till afterwards if nobody else is interested, but it was affordable housing, and you said the value wasn't there?
So, and I may need Frank to help me with this, but the application came through, they met the criteria, but the impact fee ordinance allows the school board to deny affordable housing applications if the revenue is not there to support the impact that is going to create upon us. And our board decided we didn't have other revenue sources to offset the impact if they didn't pay.
It was a school impact fee waiver.
Yeah, for waiver.
They're looking to get school.
Don't give us that option on the cheap houses are being built.
I think
We did deny the project.
Right.
We
Waiver
denied the
impact.
waiver.
Yeah.
Okay. Unless they have additional funds in a bank account.
Yeah, if we were sitting on $100 million.
I had to have clarification. I know that guy over there is going to say, they didn't cover our costs.
And let's really be frank here. The affordable housing complexes, I think we went up on multifamily from like 0.2 to like 0.45. You break that down another into the affordable housing, you go to 1. You basically have
It's
one
almost 1 to 1.
student per unit. So the impact then is even double what the multifamily unit is now. So if you say, well, they should get a waiver, really they're getting a cheap rate because they're paying half rate anyway. And then you want a waiver on top of that? We simply, you would hear me squawking.
Yeah.
It just didn't get the waiver.
And in
Vivian,
fact, they are
I could
open and
definitely
operating.
afford to
Yes.
something, or if you're just getting,
What's that?
Absolutely not.
Don't you want
I'm fine.
okay.
I thought this meeting was
I know
really
that.
great and productive. I know I learned a lot about how you guys do the scaling system, and I think we cleared up a lot of, for me at least, it cleared up a lot of questions that I had as well on the concerns for the school board and the parents talking about whether or not the impact and how the impact is. So I want to thank you guys for this. I think it was great information.
Thank you.
Can we get y'all not to put any more schools on arterial roads?
Yes.
Another workshop.
There's 2 more here now.
While we're sitting here.
No, actually, that's a good point,
that's a great
because
question.
that is something that we run into, that and also the loops. I mean, the interior capacity, which then backs up on those roads, and that causes then, because you guys are done. So,
And everyone drives their kid to school now.
yeah, it's different from.
It's different than when
when we
any of
grew
us were kids. Yeah, there's so many
Well,
people.
it's different
and
because
it
there's
really-
70,000 students, not 10.
We're happy to launch a joint campaign that says, please ride the bus.
We love it.
I think it's because.
We
too
just
much
need
stuff.
bus drivers.
Then we'll have a new campaign for bus
I'll tell you
drivers.
that right there. We cut down some gas.
But it's a fair point.
It's
and
a
we
very
agree-
fair
We
point.
agree
We
with
can
you.
look at
Preferred
doing
it's
that.
cost is the
It's
the
all about
main-
cost.
Yeah,
I
I mean,
understand.
otherwise, like philosophically, we're all on the same page on that, but it
Yeah.
becomes a function of cost, is how much can we
Cost of
afford to
space.
pay for a piece of
So
land.
let's talk, we can talk about Boggy Creek. That property was purchased like in 2007. And so it was there. Where else are you going to go? You have to, you see that schools already. I didn't see Rhonda probably knows the capacity.
Not right now.
But it's there. It's not like there's
Yeah.
nobody at Toho High
Yeah.
School. There's
It's
a lot of
pro-
kids there.
It's projected to be full within 3 years.
Yeah, 3 years. It's
But
going to
a
be
better
full.
way of even working that circulation, because I
Yeah.
know they don't open the gates till a certain time, and then you
Right.
get a backup, and then you have parents going across the street in subdivisions and waiting, and kids crossing the street which shouldn't be crossing
And
the
those
street.
are the kind of things that we definitely need to work together on.
Well,
Absolutely.
Sunbridge, Center Lake Ranch, make sure that even though they're master planning it, don't let them put that, even to say we can change it later.
You don't want it on Arcusy Road?
No. No.
Neptune's what I always
That
say.
I-
Neptune
But then also remember, and I bring this point up a lot too, a lot of these schools were built, and Rhonda can tell you, if they were built 20 years ago, say like Neptune back in '89, that little school was built for like 800 kids. And so they're stacking for 800 kids. Well, now there's 1,400, 1,500 kids just because of the way the state funds, and we all get funded now. Everything's different. And so you have these older facilities who believed there'd be that many houses in 1989 off of Neptune Road? You don't know these kind of things, but then we can't just tear down the school and go build another one. It is where it is, and we have to make do with what we have. Unless Don wants to
Like a jail.
fork over some money.
Say no.
We're prepared to widen Neptune at 2022, 2023. So that should help out that school. Yeah.
That'll help out a lot.
But yeah, if y'all could really, when you're looking at school sites, really look at your
And I
street
think
activities.
And
and-
I'm assuming that Rhonda's team is getting that from your group too,
So
right?
we-
As we
So we
start.
meet quarterly as a technical working group, and that includes the county and the 2 cities. And we actually take all school sites through them. Now, like Ricky said, there were some sites we've all inherited, and now we're just living. But in the last 5 years with me, we take the sites into them, and then we also take preliminary plans into your DRC, and we get a courtesy review before we move forward.
Because I agree with you, Brenda.
But I think if you look at Celebration, which does have an interior school, it's terrible. the getting in and out of it.
Yeah.
Well, but
It's
that's
no
also
better.
the thing. It
It creates
actually
a-
works good for high schools, or I mean, middle and elementary. It's terrible for high schools. You have to have a lot of connectivity for a high school because you're talking about 3,000 kids. You're talking about huge sporting events and other events. A developer doesn't want a high school in the middle of their development. So there are those things to take
Lights
into
and-
account.
Yeah,
The
noise.
lights,
I got you.
noise, and all
I'm
those
just thinking
things.
about traffic.
Yeah.
No, I understand.
All right, is there anything else? What was that?
I don't know if you're required to take public comment. We are at ours, but.
At a workshop, no. I don't
We're
think so.
not at a workshop.
Good. All right.
Thank you.
Okay.
There's nothing else?
Whatever Frank said, Frank.
Frank said it.
Wake up, Frank.
December 10th has plenty of warning. You should give more warning than you usually give to everybody.
I'm sure we will get public comment.
Oh, there'll be plenty of comment.
We'll get public comment. Tell them, we'll get public comment.